Hi, welcome to this channel and welcome to this video here. Welcome back to the Maggie sewing project, which is a skirt pattern for me. The pattern is all available in all my shops, the links you will find below this video here. And this video is especially for the long Maggie with the train. So this is a very dramatic option and there are some special things to be taken care of. But don't worry, it's not that complicated.
Regarding the order of the working steps, by the way, this chapter 8 can be seen as an addition to chapter 4.2. So when we are about to close all vertical seams, means the center back here, for this sewing sample of the Maggie skirt, I'm adding a godet. At first I'm pinning the godet to one of the back parts. Please take care that the godet notches at the godet and the back part are aligning. Of course, the right fabric sides of the two pattern pieces are facing now and the hemline edges are meeting. The linking seam for the godet will only go from the godet notch down to the hemline. Then the godet seam can be closed with 1 cm seam allowance as always. Just take care that this seam really starts at the godet notch only and not at the godet fabric edge. Then comes the second side of the godet. Again, I'm pinning the fabric pieces together with their right sides facing and I'm aligning the end of godet notches at the godet and the back parts. The seam is again from the end of godet notch down to the hemline and as always with 1 cm seam allowance. That means at the notch, which is called end of godet, both seams are now meeting. Afterwards, we can close the center back. If your zipper will be in the side seam, you can close it completely from the godet notch upwards to the upper edge. But if your zipper will be here in the center back seam later, you only close a few centimeters from the end of godet notch upwards. This means the center back seam is now the third seam, which meets with the other two godet seams at the end of godet notch. Now you can understand perhaps why it is so important to work precisely here. So here I'm closing my center back seam, beginning at the end of godet notch, then sewing upwards with 1 cm seam allowance, but here in my case, as I've already told you, just a few centimeters. Afterwards I'm pressing all the seam allowances apart. Here at the godet notch, I'm just pressing one seam after the other. Now you are ready to hop back to the first sewing video and to continue with chapter 4.3. Here in this video I'll talk about more things special to the long Maggie with train. Of course it's nice to have one, but sometimes it's also practical to just tie it up. For example, when you're dancing. So let's add this tie-up function. For this we need a tape, which can be a satin tape or a self-made out of a fabric tunnel, out of the main fabric or the lining fabric. This tape should be 65 cm long and around 6 mm wide. This whole tie-up function is happening at the inside of the skirt, between the main fabric layer and the lining layer, if you have one. Now cut a few centimeters of this tape and form a small loop and put this at the end of the godet, at the lining and also the main fabric here. The rest of the tape is put in half and fixed with its center at the end of the zipper. But in this short attachment seam, you should not only integrate the zipper tape end, but also the seam allowances of both the lining and the main fabric. This prevents, at least a little bit, that the tied up train pulls down the skirt at the center back seam. The weight is just distributed better. When the loops and the tapes are attached with small seams at the skirt, please make sure that your seams are only made on the seam allowance so that they won't show at the outside of the skirt or even at the inside. They are only visible between these layers. Here I've sewn on the tape in the wrong way. Please make it like I've showed you before. This seam should include the zipper tape end and the seam allowances of both the lining and the main fabric. Now you can guide each of the tape ends through one of the loops you created at the godet end. Then you pull at the tape ends and you make a tie. Like this, the end of the godet is brought to the zipper end, means the whole train is tied up. Then there are two things I'd like to add about the hem in this video here. So let's say you've tried on your skirt with the correct shoes already and figured out how much you have to shorten it or not, depending on your body height and your planned hem allowance. This is now only for the case you actually have to cut the hem, like it was the case for me here. At the front part in between the side seams, I have to shorten it parallelly by this amount here. This is more than the hem allowance I will need. Right after the side seam, the curve of the hem is so strong that I cannot pin the hem properly. And also for the back part, I'd like to keep the length of the train. So I'm just clipping the hem edge a few times so that I can fold the curve properly, and I'm guiding that folded width from about 3 to 4 cm, I don't remember, in the front part to only 1 cm in the back part. By the way, I'm making the narrow hem here. The last thing is that with a Maggie with lining and train, the lining layer should be fixed on the main fabric layer. These links will be placed at each seam, the side seams and the godet seams, and will be situated around 10 cm above the hem. So for this, I'm pinning at first the layers together at these places. Please do this when your Maggie is hanging. Like this, you can make sure that nothing pulls. In this case, of course, we can't just fix both layers together with a small seam on the seam allowance. I'm quite sure sooner or later the lining layer will pull up the main fabric layer. These links between the layers will be hand crocheted loops. So I'm starting with a thread and a hand needle. I'm not working with a single thread here, but I'm folding it so that I have it in around 8 plies. Then I can knot the end. After marking the exact points at the main fabric and lining, I pierce with my needle through both layers, from one layer to the other a few times. Then I make sure that the thread in between these layers is now around 1 to 2 cm long. This will be the length of the crochet loop later. Like this, the layers still have some space to move and no layer will be pulled severely by the other. Then I start to make knots around these threads. At the end, the whole thread length should be covered in these knots. This looks a little bit like crochet stitches, so I'm calling this crochet loop, but in fact, these are just knots. At the end, I'm securing my thread with a few knots on the main fabric layer, and then this fake crochet loop is done. This, of course, I have to repeat on all 3 other seams on the skirt. Okay, that's it. I hope this video helped you to create your Maggie with train for your special occasion. I hope you enjoyed the sewing process. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. And I hope to see you very soon again to my next video. Take care until then. Bye!